Welcome, everybody, to the Thrive Together Masterclass for February 2025, where our success habit for the month is know yourself. And so I decided this year to match our success habits with our masterclass so we could really have a strong theme every month for how do your skills, your work habits, and for this month, how you know yourself fit into the formula for your success. So there is no one person I knew better to invite to be the guest for this topic than my beloved Margaret Smith, known as Mo from I Love It When, and co-founder with me for BU, Authentic Leadership. So welcome, Mo.
Yeah.
Thanks for being here with me.
Oh, thank you so much. It is one of my favorite topics, especially to talk about with you. So I'm really excited to be here.
So, for people who are here or listening to this replay that want to know who you are and why should they listen to you, give us a little bit of history on how you've
Okay.
gotten to this point in your career.
Okay. So like Kathleen mentioned, my company is called I Love It When, but prior to this, I was in real estate for about 7.5 years. I was the director of operations for a real estate team called Pickett Street Properties out of Bothell, Washington. And then prior to that, I had just gotten my master's in social work and had been working at the Seattle Art Museum. So I always tell people my background is really in art and loving the study of people. I was always really curious from a very young age as to why people did the things that they did. And I think that curiosity is truly what has driven me to want to get to know myself at a really deep level, because I recognized at some point, like, the better I knew myself, the better I was able to serve, which serving the world and being a part of the solution has always been a big piece of what drives me. And so, fortunately, when I was with this real estate team, they were really driven for personal development and growth. And
Mm.
so we started doing a lot of different book clubs and conferences and classes, and it really got me so excited and even drove that curiosity further. And so I think that's really what drove me to create my own business. And so now with I Love It When, I'm a coach about 50% of the time, and then I do workshops and retreats and speaking engagements that are really all about being yourself. When it comes down to it, that's like the root of everything, because I truly believe that if everybody were able and felt fully safe enough and comfortable enough to be themselves, we would have a very different world. I
Yeah.
really believe that. Yeah.
Yeah, I so appreciate the evolution of your career and how that's also impacted you. I think it's important to acknowledge that you started your business during 2020.
Yes, thank you. That's I was actually just reminding myself of that yesterday, that to start a business in July of 2020, uh, I always heard a lot of real estate agents, and if you're on here and you're a real estate agent, I've heard a lot of agents talk about how when they started their businesses in the downturn, various downturns, or just times in the business when it was not the easiest, is what they really thought made them the most successful. And I can understand now why, because you really have to be creative. You got to pivot. You got to you got to really lean on a number of different things. And I definitely think it's been difficult, but it's also been an asset for sure.
And so I
Yeah.
think too, right, this evolution of authenticity has
hmm
been happening. I'll speak from the United States culture, right, over
hmm
the last several years in particular, but maybe certainly even over the last several decades.
hmm
Where if we think back right to the 1950s and American graffiti and
hmm
McDonald's hamburgers being born, like there was a whole lot of let's make it the same
hmm
and
hmm
have that be how you fit in and how we create efficiency
hmm
and now and then we had factories and all of that. I did a presentation last year about the history of work, that started with farms and then went to factories and
Yeah.
then went to big businesses, and now we have so much more entrepreneurial work happening.
hmm hmm
So in entrepreneurial work, authenticity sort of comes along with it kind of maybe whether or not you want to take this journey, but your business is a reflection of who you are, who you have become, and who you
Yeah.
are becoming.
Hmm.
And then it also is, in my experience, the part of the compass, the moral compass for how I make decisions,
Hmm.
right? To know what's right for me, what's not right for me.
Hmm.
And I have made the assumption here that people know who I am. So I should probably take a second to say, hi, I'm Kathleen Metcalf, the founder of Cambium. And I just celebrated 23 years in the real estate industry, and I just celebrated 12 years as the founder and leader of this
Amazing.
business, which has been through many economic stances and different iterations, starting at Bullseye Hiring, and we were Atlas for a hot second when we got purchased, and then it was Kathleen Metcalf Coaching and Training, and I renamed the company Cambium a few years ago, very intentionally, because cambium, spelled with a C, is the layer underneath the bark of a tree that provides the tree with oxygen and nutrients to grow and thrive throughout its lifetime. And Cambium is an operations coaching and training company that provides products and services to support real estate agents, brokerages, teams to be able to sell and do as much as they want and have infrastructure underneath and
Hmm.
great teamwork. And so it is with great privilege, right, that Margaret and I co-founded BU together, which started out as well, right, for real estate operations professionals to
Hmm.
be able to step forward into their own leadership, into their own authenticity, so that they have, because they have an important voice,
Hmm.
to be able to step up. And so that, I think, has also had, it kind of feels like a wave, like the crashing of a wave into everyone needs to find their voice and
Hmm.
their authenticity to be able to know, okay, who are the right clients for me?
Hmm.
Should I have a team? Should I grow my business?
Hmm.
What does scaling look like in my business for me?
Hmm.
And for some agents, what's my exit strategy? I think the average age of a real estate agent is between 45 and 55. And so that's at that second third of someone's career. Not that you could sell real estate right until you're 105, but at the same time, right, how do we help real estate professionals through
Hmm.
Cambium to be able to start their business, maintain their business, grow their business, and exit their business, depending on what
Hmm.
that looks like. But let's dive into some of the ways in which people can get to know themselves and then be able to apply that to their business.
Okay.
So one of those topics that is how you get to know yourself are assessments.
Hmm. Hmm.
One of the ways to do that are a values exercise
Hmm.
and different kinds of exercises, right? Books, lectures, workshops to be able to
Hmm.
have experiences. From your experience and in your business, what topic do you think you'd like us to start on with how does someone engage in this process?
I think let's start talking about the different assessments first, because I love what you and I talked about when we were thinking about recording this session and how all of these different assessments, when I started to take them back in 2012, when I first did like the disc, I put myself in this box and I was like, oh, the disc has the results are DISC and they stand for different things. And I was a high S and then a C. So very stable, patient, and detail oriented. And so I kind of put myself in that box for probably 3 to 4 years. Like, this is just who I am. I can't be outside of this. I'm never going to be a driver. I'm never going to be highly social. And then as I started to do more of these assessments, like the Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, human design, all these different things, I recognized, oh, these are just kind of like a snapshot. This is not like this is Margaret. This is just what I found is that it really started to give me the language and in which to use to describe myself. Like, I remember something that will always stick out to me is I did the Myers-Briggs assessment, and then I actually had a coach that walked me through my results. and I cried as I was reading them with her because I had never had an assessment or really any person speak to my intuition. And the Myers-Briggs was the first one to put into words what I could never express. And it was so amazing to have that language to
Yeah.
share with other people, to have a way to verbalize and communicate something that I just knew was there.
Yeah.
So the assessments can be very powerful in that way.
So this is an interesting element of this, right? And I put a list of assessments in the chat, and we can put those in the show notes as well, with the idea that an assessment, right, is a third party tool. And
Hmm.
I have always been taught they are not tests.
Hmm. Hmm.
They are an assessment because they are reading different levels and they are reflecting back to you information based on the way in which you answer questions. And then part of your job and or the facilitator you might be working with or the coach you might be working with is to then say, does this resonate with you?
Hmm.
So what you're really looking for is an outside way to describe what you know on the inside,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? Be
Yeah.
able to feel seen, feel
Hmm.
heard, and perhaps
Hmm.
be able to have a vocabulary, as you just said,
Hmm.
to be able
Hmm.
to articulate something that then describes, oh, yeah, right? This is
Yeah.
why it's hard for me to do this, or this is why I
Yeah.
love doing this, is
Yeah.
that you're really just looking for information that puts context on what you
Hmm.
do know at a certain level,
Hmm.
but it needs to become much more conscious.
Yeah, you're reminding me of, when we're in school. And so we learn all these things about everything outside of us, but there's not a lot of focus in regular traditional school. And I'd gotten my undergraduate degree, then I got my graduate degree. There was a little bit of self-reflection there, but not a lot. It was a lot about learning about everything outside of me. And
Mhm.
so when I had a boss, and I had several different bosses before I got to the one at Pickett Street, I realized I didn't know how to communicate about how I felt about certain things. This is my perspective. I could say certain opinions, uh, but I found myself getting extremely frustrated and not knowing how to communicate. And I couldn't get them to understand, and it
Yeah.
was very frustrating because I had a specific perspective, like you were talking about at the beginning. Like everybody's got something to add. I had this perspective that could really add, excuse me, a lot of value to the team and to the business we were building. But if
Yeah.
I couldn't say it in such a way that someone could understand, it was never going to leave the inside of my head. And this is really, I think, what began my drive to create community for operations in real estate, because I recognized that I was not the only one in this. There were a lot of other people, a lot of other admin and operations folks that could not clearly communicate all of their thoughts. And so sometimes there can be a lot of like opposition between these two different parts of the business when there doesn't need to be. It all comes down to like, let's get to a better level of communication, because the value is huge when those two perspectives and points of the business are working well together.
Yes, and so I just put in the chat for everyone, Susan Scott, the author of Fierce Conversations, beach ball analogy, because I talk about this all the time, and I thank you for letting me know about this book, because it's just such a perfect way to think about having a beach ball with all these different colored stripes on it, and everyone on the team or at the brokerage or between inside a transaction or in our
Mm-hmm.
lives is standing on a different color,
Mm-hmm.
and they do not see the situation the same way we see it. So we
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to have a way to communicate. And what's also underneath that everyone's standing on a different color is its conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And those SCs in particular, right on the disc assessment, don't like conflict. Even the I doesn't like conflict, right? Which is that outgoing, extroverted person.
Mm-hmm.
And no one really wants to have conflict necessarily, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just a different perspective. It's a different point of
Mm-hmm.
view. And so, what is
Mm-hmm.
the common vocabulary? How can we each learn to speak up about what we see, what we know?
Mm-hmm.
For example, the example I like to use is most high producing real estate agents have a very high sense of urgency. So they like everything done now. But on
Mm-hmm.
the administrative side of that coin, we can't do everything now. We have to do one thing at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So that means we have to be able to communicate an understanding and a prioritization of the real sense of urgency and what are the expectations that we can set so that the admin doesn't feel like they're running at sprint level all day long to keep up with, I want it done now. Well, okay, but how about now at 10 o'clock and then now at 11 o'clock and then a different now at 12 o'clock? Then I'd like to take lunch and then maybe we could have a third, then we could get at 1 o'clock. So to be able to have that understanding, otherwise it turns into, I thought you were going to do that now and I'm doing the best I can, which then just turns into disappointment and resentment.
Yeah, I like the point you brought up about conflict, because I'd also like to share that being someone who was not very fond of conflict before, I started to recognize too, through learning about myself, that part of the miscommunication that happens is that we grew up in different homes. We grew up in different lives. We grew up in different places. So we all have different definitions for the same words. And so I'd be having a conversation with my boss at the time, and we'd be starting to argue. And then about 10 minutes in, I'd say, oh my gosh, we're talking about the same thing. We're just using slightly different definitions. Oh my gosh, mind blown. And so I started to recognize, how do I actually define conflict? And I started to change my perspective on what is conflict actually. Conflict doesn't mean we have to argue or fight or that it has to be a bad experience. Conflict is not even, it's less about conflict. It's more about just gaining clarity. And so I started to get this real, I've always been someone who likes clarity, but I think it became even more clear as I was getting to know myself that I love clarity. Because even if I have a different opinion from someone else, I want to understand you. And so I started to have clarity be what my main goal was. And then I started sharing that with the people that I was in conflict with. Hey, I just want to my goal is clarity here. I'm okay if you don't think the same way that I do, but I want to understand you, because if I can understand you, then we can reach the same goal together. And so clarity became a big deal to me. It's very much, even though it's not listed as one of the values on my website, it is basically one of my deepest values, because once I'm clear on something and clear on how somebody else thinks, I can decide whether or not I want to align with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's Brene Brown, right? Clear is kind.
Oh, yes.
Is one of the expressions that she's known for. And so the opposite of being clear would be making assumptions. And that goes back to that old expression, to assume, right, makes an ass out of you and me. So if we're not clear, then we're making assumptions. And I'm famous for that with my husband, who's like, really, you're gonna, but yes, I'm gonna clarify, because language matters to me, right? To be able to know, well, did you mean this Dan or this Bob, or did you mean 4 o'clock today, or were you talking about Saturday? I want to be able to have that clarity.
Yeah.
And so then I'm not making an assumption about who we're talking about, what time we're talking about, or what day we're talking about, right? Because then later I might have disappointment and resentment, which is much too big in my past. I do not want that in my present.
Yeah. Clarity brings such peace. When I'm living in clarity, even if I don't know all the things that are going to happen, but if I'm clear on things, I feel such peace in my body. And then I can make decisions from that place. And when you're making decisions from a place of peace, it's very different from a place of reactionary type feelings. Yeah.
Yes. And so I think this also relates to around know yourself, and then how do people use that information to determine how they want to spend their time, how they want to spend their energy, and what it is that they want to achieve in terms of goals. So there's an exercise that I did recently at a live event, and I actually used flat slate stones to prove my point, with painted words on them about what you can control and what you can't control. And the idea is, in the world of real estate, there are so many things we cannot control. Then I've become quite famous for saying the 3 things you can control, which are the thoughts you focus on, the words you say, and the actions you decide to take. So I had people hold rocks with all the different things on it, like, can you control other people's opinions? And can you control, but if you're trying to control how people react, their opinion, what they're going to decide, then you're carrying all this weight that it's a waste of energy.
Hmm.
So the idea being inside your 3-foot circle of control, which are your thoughts that you focus on, the words you say, and the actions you take, then everything else you can perhaps influence, but you cannot control. So therefore, knowing yourself, knowing what you can and cannot do,
Hmm.
starts to align then living authentically, and then how you want to participate and how you're going to navigate making decisions. So
Hmm.
one of the books I also have you to thank for knowing about this is Anise Kavanaugh's work.
Hmm. Hmm.
So let's talk about that for a few minutes, because she's
Hmm.
quite famous for, let's see, Contagious You
Hmm.
and then Contagious Culture,
Hmm.
right? Are her two books.
Hmm.
What is the history with that, if you don't mind sharing? How did you get introduced to her work? And then what kind of impact has her work made in your life and your career?
Hmm. I first heard about Contagious Culture, which is her book that focuses more on the team environment, the culture of your company and organization.
Yes.
And it was referred to me by the girl who worked at the front desk at the Keller Williams office that I was at. And she knew, her name's Sarah, and she is like, Margaret, you're going to love this book. You got to check it out. I opened it up, and in the foreword, I hadn't even gotten to the main first chapter yet. I read the foreword, and then like the first page of the first chapter, and I was like, oh my gosh, who is this woman? She is like, it's like she's speaking directly to me. Because I think what Anise has done and how I explain her is that she's done the research and the work to back up what I've always felt to be true. So
Mhm.
everything around energy and how you use your energy and your presence to impact people in the room or on your team or in your family, friends, all of that uh, can be altered, changed, and adjusted to make either a bigger impact or a lesser impact. And so Anise studied, I believe it was kinesiology, and used to work with Olympic athletes. And so as I was
Movement of
reading,
thought. Mhm.
yeah, yeah. So as
Mhm.
I was reading Contagious Culture, I was like, oh my gosh, here's all the information I've ever wanted that I haven't really wanted to research myself to show to people that this is why I know when I walk into a room, I was very aware that I could bring the energy up or I could bring it down. It was my choice how I was going to contribute. And so I always made this very conscious choice, whether I was in a room with friends or colleagues or my family, that I was going to contribute in a positive manner because I knew that when I was in a sour place, if I wasn't doing well, I could actually change the energy in the space. I felt it.
Yeah.
And so Anise provided all of that data and all of these stories, and she's been bringing this work into large corporations for years. And she's really starting to take off now. And so Contagious You is where she focuses really all on you. And there are assessments in there that I use with my coaching clients. And it's a really great way to gauge and gain self awareness on like how are you leaving a space? Are you one of those leaders that comes in and people just leave feeling the wake of your energy, like, oh, they were in a bad mood today, like I definitely
Mm.
don't want to go talk to that person because there's a lot going on there. I think when you don't have awareness around your presence, uh, it really impacts how large of a business you can build and how I don't know, the word that keeps coming to me is trustworthy. Like, do people trust you? And because trust builds business in a really beautiful way too. So her books have had a huge impact on how I operate and how I've built my business for sure.
I
Hmm.
remember because we had her come as a speaker,
Hmm.
right, while we were in BU a few years
Hmm.
ago.
Hmm.
And she did an exercise having us close our eyes
Hmm.
and check the inside of our bubble, right? Because everyone has this sort of force field of, I call it the 3-foot circle, which I learned in recovery.
Hmm.
But not only that it's a circle on the floor, but that it's actually a bubble all the way around us. And where are there any tears? Where is there a
Hmm.
snag? Where is there something going on that it is not intact so that the energy is leaking sort of back
Hmm.
and forth? or has an opportunity to be disrupted. And so that was such a powerful visual because my husband says I have such a cartoon brain. I think in pictures, right? So having that bubble image and having it have a tear in it or a snag in it was like, oh, wow.
hmm
I hadn't even noticed that until she did a guided meditation with us. And I was like, oh, now I can see it right in here.
Yeah.
Be able to smooth that out because this is something
hmm
I am responsible for. This is
hmm
my bubble. This is my
hmm
space.
hmm Yeah, she's definitely also been a proponent. I've heard this from a lot of different people who work with energy too, but I bubble up now whenever I go into networking events so that I can stay with my own energy and I'm not taking on other people's energy. Because again, if I am feeling other people's energy or feelings, then it can change how I am. So every time I leave my house, I bubble up now and I think of a niece because I can just bring myself and be very um, sovereign is the word I'm thinking of, like very much in my own energy, and people sense that. And when people sense my energy, I know it makes an impact, I've been told.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I loved that exercise that she gave us.
Yeah, and I think as real estate agents who are going out into the world, right,
hmm
and meeting with clients, right, people often buy or sell real estate for five primary triggers. They're
hmm
getting married, they're having a
hmm
baby, someone's getting divorced, someone died, or there's
hmm
a relocation for a job. So the client is going through a life event,
Yep.
which may mean that their bubble is all over the place,
hmm
which is all the more important, right, for the agent and hence their team to be able to have a clean approach, to be able to be the calm in the storm for people and not
hmm
participate in the chaos.
hmm hmm
So, since we're also on the realm about books, let's talk about the emotion code because I think
Okay.
the nice transition from how science and the world of the invisible, right, like
hmm
energy, come
hmm
together to help people know themselves.
hmm
And we have also noticed at Cambium that Olympic athletes sometimes get into real estate when they're done being Olympic athletes. So it also
Interesting.
is a driver, I think, between that wanting to be the best, the discipline of practice,
Yep.
of the drive to achieve, to meet challenges. And so with that kind of personality and that kind of makeup,
hmm
or what may be common in the real estate industry, even if someone wasn't an Olympic athlete, right?
hmm
But then how do they get to know? How is their body trying to talk to them
hmm
to get them to know themselves so that
hmm
they can use that information to make appropriate choices about how to take care of themselves, what they should be
hmm
involved in or not? So you
hmm
have more recently been introduced to the emotion code.
hmm
So
Yeah, I have the book here with me. So it's by Dr. Bradley Nelson. And I heard
oh
about
yeah.
it about a year and a half ago. And then I finally sat down and read it just in November. So just like 4 or 5 months ago. And I was immediately like pulled in by it and said, I have to get certified in this because essentially what it is he uses muscle testing to help you identify trapped emotions in your body. And then you can release it using a magnet off your fridge. And I think the part that I was so drawn to was one, I really love tools that I can teach my clients that they can go off and do on their own immediately. And so that's what I saw in this book. I was like, this is fantastic. If I can help my clients be able to do this on themselves, on their kids, on their animals, what a fantastic gift to give them. And then because I'm also an energy healer, I'm always looking for different tips and tools for myself. And essentially, one of the best things I've learned in this journey of getting to know myself is that you can get trapped emotions in your body from different events in your life.
Mhm.
If you had trauma when you were a kid or any sort of incident, all the way up until however old you are now, if you don't feel those feelings and release them, it can get stuck in different parts of your body. So the way I describe energy is just kind of like my cup here. This cup is made of energy. And the difference with emotions is that we just don't have a visual representation of them always. And so if this cup represents grief and I had somebody pass away, let's say 10 years ago, if I didn't fully feel that grief, it could get stuck right here in my chest. And eventually it could manifest as some sort of a pain. And so I run into a lot of people in business who are suffering from all sorts of random pains, hip pain, shoulder pain, different things have happened.
Yeah.
And if you can use the emotion code to identify stuck emotions in that area and release that trapped emotion, you can feel relief from the pain. And then what I've also found is that if I don't have all of these added stuck emotions on me anymore, once I let them go, I'm making decisions differently because I'm no longer feeling that trapped emotion. So, like, for instance, one of the emotions that has come off a lot is, I think, heartache and frustration. There's a couple of them there because I've now released probably over 150 emotions from myself. And so what I found is what I'm going through the day and I'm looking at different business decisions I need to make or decisions about money. I'm coming to these decisions with a much calmer presence. I'm able to
Mm,
be much more responsive rather than reactive. And so that's where my mind's just been like, oh my gosh, because I see so many business owners making decisions from a place of fear, from a
yeah.
place of scarcity, from a place of just being afraid that they're going to make a wrong move, rather than coming at it from a very calm, logical, like, let's look at this from a strategic standpoint. And so that's where what I love about this book is that we're removing things that we don't need. And when you have that awareness, you approach life differently, which is ultimately the goal. Like, I want my authentic self to make these decisions, not this fear that
Right.
that does not need to drive. Yeah.
Right. The fear, which is also often an avoidance, right? So
Hmm.
a protection. So it's all pulling in, making things smaller, right? Seeing fewer possibilities, doesn't want conflict, right? So you can see, right, how it keeps, but to be able to face things, let them
Hmm.
go, move through
Hmm.
them,
Hmm.
opens up to possibility.
Hmm.
So I put in the chat, right? So this then leads to emotions and then how people make decisions.
Hmm.
And then this leads directly into about know yourself, the comfort zone and growth.
Yep.
So I love the expression comfort zone is comfortable until it becomes so uncomfortable because you
Hmm.
need to grow, right? The comfort
Hmm.
zone just has like an expiration date. It's not, maybe it's
Hmm.
not quite dairy, you know what I mean? But it's definitely even canned goods, right? Have an expiration on the bottom. In fact, I think I found that when I
Hmm.
cleaned my pantry over the holidays, I found a can of pumpkin in there and I was like, oh, got a bad date. It's like 3 years old. It got stuck in the back in the corner. I thought I would do something with it, right? So that had to go in the compost, but and then recycle bin. But the idea, right, that the comfort zone
Hmm.
um, it doesn't last, and it also
Yeah.
isn't really safe. It's a place to
Yeah.
rest,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
not live.
Yeah. My friend Crystal calls it the control zone.
All
And I'm like,
right.
oh, kind of like that. Because that's where you feel like you have control. Yeah. Yeah. So I found that this book has already it's been changing my life in so many ways and been changing the lives of the people that I've been teaching it to. So there are people I know that I've taught it now in probably 3 different workshops. I just have to bring it with me because it's been that important. And there are people who are doing it on their kids already. Their kids are experiencing big feelings, big emotions, and they don't belong to them. And so it's been really cool. So it's a very easy read and it's a very easy process. If you're listening to this and you want to try it, you can always reach out to me. But honestly, reading the book and following along, or I think I have a podcast where I talk through the actual process too.
Yes.
All you need is a magnet and your body. Like, you can make it happen.
And talk to yourself through it.
Hmm.
So, so let's connect what we've talked about so far to growth and skills to achieve different results.
Okay.
So the idea here is of why even the success habit of know yourself, why did we even choose that? Right? Because it's one thing to achieve a certain level of success or results, equality, and it's fine to maintain that, right? We're not trying to promote that someone always has to be getting bigger and greater and grander.
Hmm.
That's not the
Hmm.
idea. The
Hmm.
idea is then to be able to have um, the kinds of results over time that are most important to you.
Hmm.
So one of the things that you and I have also shared about is the grind culture.
Hmm.
right? It makes me tired just even to say it out loud. And there are appropriate times to grind or to
Hmm.
bear down, to be
Hmm.
able to deliver, practice something, learn something. But that also shifts, right? You're an individual agent, let's say, and then you get married. Okay, well, and then maybe now you have a baby, and now
Hmm.
you have two babies, and now you want to go to
Hmm.
soccer practice, and now you want to be involved in the community, and now
Hmm.
you want to be involved in your church community, and right, and now you want to be able to go on vacation for 2 weeks. And so there are all these things that shift and change over time, so that the way in which someone was managing their business at one point in time is not
Hmm.
necessarily how they want to always use their energy at
Hmm.
other times, whether
Hmm.
that be personal or, yes, they do want to reach a whole nother level of success in terms of monetary results or volume. And so that also requires growth,
Hmm.
which then requires other skills.
Hmm.
And so this know yourself, having assessments, reading books, practicing some of the exercises, it leads me to sometimes like, what are some of the skills that the agents and their operations team members, if confronting conflict, right? Being able to talk through things is a skill and
Hmm.
something for people to grow into.
Hmm.
And with the shifts that have happened in the real estate market, maybe people are needing to pick up the phone more and
Hmm.
call and talk to past clients or
Hmm.
prospect and follow leads. And so that may be out of their comfort control zone, right?
Hmm.
But if you know yourself that you care deeply about
Hmm.
helping other people, well, then you're motivated to take those actions because you want
Hmm.
to help people, not
Hmm.
because you love making phone calls to, strangers or people that you know.
Yeah. Well, I think as you build that ability to know yourself too, the thing that becomes a skill is, can you ask yourself good questions? So whenever somebody says to me, like, if an agent were to say, like, Margaret, I can't make these calls. I just can't. And I'll just ask them questions. Why do you think that is? Well, I just feel anxious. What are they going to say? And so I just ask questions until we get to the root of whatever it is. And I think reflection, just like confronting conflict and talking through conflict, reflection is a skill, and you can get better and better and better at it. And the better you are at reflecting, the more you will learn how different things in your life have created the person that you are. And though, so you and I have talked often about how your brain is like an operating system, and you were plugged in, you were put all these different things, how you think about marriage, how you think about business, how you think about life, all of those things were put into your brain by whoever you grew up around. And it is possible to rewrite some of those programs. So if you have limiting beliefs around money, or if you have limiting beliefs around what you're capable of doing with a phone call, you can change that. And so that's where I think reflection comes in. And it becomes critical that if you, I think, want to have a successful business that has deep roots, that's strong and resilient, I think it's very reflective of how well you know yourself and how well you're able to evaluate and reflect.
Yeah, and so I'm putting this in the chat for everyone, and we can put this in the notes, is, and this is something, right, that we built into the first phase at BU,
Hmm.
is to really take a look at what are your beliefs and do they still serve you?
Yes, I love that question.
And I
Love
have
it.
seen this recently in a very dear loved one who hasn't questioned certain beliefs, and so therefore is really suffering
Hmm.
as aging is happening.
Hmm.
Right. But the idea that the operating system, right, because this is the brain in a box, and for all any of those listening that don't already know this, you are not your mind.
Yes. Amen. Wait,
You
again.
are not your mind. You have a mind. It's a brain in a box. It's a machine. And the machine is programmed by the things we heard, the things
Hmm.
that we then took on as a belief,
Hmm.
information that we took in as fact, right? And
Yeah.
we have programmed the operating system in the brain.
Hmm.
But just like your iPhone, it gets an update sometimes, right? And then your home
Mm-hmm.
screen looks different or the
Mm-hmm.
capabilities are upgraded. And so
Mm-hmm.
the idea is you're not your mind,
Mm-hmm.
you have a mind. And so then what are you doing to nurture it, to clean house, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just mentioned briefly over the holidays, I cleaned out my pantry and cleaned out the big closet in my bathroom, which I don't think I had done for many years in the bathroom. I was like, oh, there's a lot of dust up here. And like, these Band-Aids are old. And anyway, so it was a fantastic exercise. I feel so much more, open to the new year. It was just really magical to
Yeah.
do that. But right, so what are the beliefs that we have about getting money, about
Mm-hmm.
working with clients, about meeting
Mm-hmm.
strangers, about
Mm-hmm.
negotiating a deal, about
Mm-hmm.
hiring someone, about getting along with team members, about
Mm-hmm.
telling our spouse what we need in terms of time to work or do a new project. All those things can be questioned.
Mm-hmm.
Whether we can certainly do that for ourselves, but that's also something can explore with a coach.
Yeah.
Sometimes this stuff is hard to look at just all by yourself with your own brain in a box.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I have had mentors and coaches myself who I just love and adore because they bring a perspective, they bring a different set of eyes to look at me and say, "Hey, have you considered this? Hey, have you thought about this?" Um, because yeah, some things are really hard to see when you're inside of it yourself. It's really difficult, um, but I can't tell you how much that has helped me when I'm thinking about decisions I made in the past. And I got to this point where I started to teach myself to ask, do I really want this? Is this something I want? Or am I making this decision based on what other people want? Because I realized a lot of my life, I was making decisions based on other people's needs because I wanted to see other people happy. And that's when I recognized that I was not living my life for me. I was living my life trying to make all these other people happy. And that became a huge turning point. Yeah.
Yes, and that is also something, right, that can fuel us and feel like the right thing until it starts to become a bit of a cage,
Hmm.
a bit confining. Because
Hmm.
if you're saying yes to something you don't really want to do because you're doing it because of the way they're going to react or the way that they're going to
Hmm.
think about you, now you know you're doing something for a different motivation, which
Hmm.
is authentic, really.
Hmm.
So this is also leading into then other ways to get to know yourself. I love this exercise that you do where you look back at the end of the year. And it
Hmm.
doesn't have to wait until the end of the year, right? It's something you could do
Hmm.
every month, every quarter, is you
Absolutely.
look at your calendar of how you spent your time.
Hmm.
So will you tell everybody about that exercise and what you learned from that?
Hmm. Yeah, I just started doing it after my first year in business, and I did it. I do it usually in December. So looking back at the last calendar year, but like you said, sometimes I'll stop and do it at the quarter point or month if I feel like something's going on and I'm not aware of what's going on. This is how I kind of check in with myself. So I take my calendar from my phone and then I look at also my photos because that's a good way to jog my memory. And I go month by month and I look at what are what's a high that happened during the month? What's something that really good that happened? What's a low or what was a lesson is usually what I call it, not a low, but a lesson. And then for my business, I'm tracking each month how many clients was I coaching at the time? Where did they come from? And what did I net that month? And then I go through each month and I write down like each workshop I had, any other events, speaking events I had, any retreats I hosted, and it takes me probably 4 to 5 hours to get all this information out on these papers. And I make it fun. I go to a coffee shop and I just like take my time with it. And I look at, okay, where did my business come from? What did I do to get that business? And then what did I really enjoy? Like what, when I think about all these things and I see them all out and it's just on one piece of paper. So I like keeping it all in a space where I can see it too, because then I'm drawn to stuff and I look and see, okay, what gave me the most energy this year? Oh, I really loved this workshop, or I really loved that speaking engagement. I
Yeah.
didn't so much like doing this. This wasn't as much fun for me. And so that then I can move into the next year or the next month or whatever and make decisions from that place of this brought me a lot of joy and I didn't realize how much joy this was bringing me. Let me do more of that. Yeah, it's
Yes.
become really fun.
And you bring up the point of evaluating it from a place of satisfaction, joy, or a
Mhm.
lesson, right? And something that perhaps didn't go as well or you didn't
Mhm.
enjoy. But I think this also brings up the point about how much of our lives are we consciously participating, and in
Mhm.
how much of our lives do we think we are a victim to the circumstances?
Yep.
Well, I had to do that because that's what the client wanted, or I had to do that because that's what my
Mhm.
agent wanted, or I had to do that
Mhm.
because that's what my family needed me to do. And so I think it's important to be able to recognize, and the calendar is a place to look at that. If someone uses their calendar, which of course we
Mhm.
highly recommend, that you can
Mhm.
that you write down, right? Where did you go? What did you do? Whether you're time blocking that in advance or you're using your calendar as a record keeping mechanism for,
Mhm.
okay, well, what did you do that day? Or how did you, where did the time go?
Mhm.
Because this relates back right to Atomic Habits, to the Franklin Covey system, to I don't remember the author's name of Buy Back Your Time, right? There are all these, the Miracle Morning, right? Like,
Mhm.
of your time is one of the things that is finite.
Mhm.
And so what you do with it says things. There's a parallel universe of this exercise, which is your money.
Mhm.
And to review, whether that's once a week, once a month, once a quarter, once a year,
Mhm.
where did your money go?
Mhm.
And this is a very good exercise in not having judgment.
Mhm.
And it will take discipline, but it is worth it to be able to look at, all right, so you give to certain charities. Does that bring you a sense of community and satisfaction?
Mhm.
Did you spend a lot of money on car repairs, which says to you, all right, I might be done with having an old car now because
Mhm.
I could have a new car, make a payment, not have car repair so much anymore, right? And so just to be able to look at where is the money going, and then what is your experience of that, and how
Mhm.
much of that is a conscious choice, and how much of that is either where you feel you had to, or you feel
Mhm.
victim to it, or
Mhm.
you feel like you really don't have a say. And is that true?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, this reminds me of just the idea that when you start to do more of this work and start to get to know yourself, you're living day to day with a lot more conscious intent, which takes a lot of energy. So I remember in the first couple years of doing this, I was like, this is exhausting to pay this close attention to what I'm doing every day. But once you start that habit, it just continues to grow. And so I put this little image in the handout that we have for you guys that talks about how your subconscious and your unconscious mind actually run 95% of your day. And when I remember when I first saw this, I was like, this is intense. 95, that's basically the entire almost 100%.
Yeah.
But if you think about getting up and walking, driving your car, all these things that you do where you don't have to think about each action, that's for a reason, so that you can do whatever else is in front of you and your body's just going and moving through it. But again, your long-term memory, your imagination, your emotions, your values, your fears, your intuition, all of these things are things that you can program and work with. And I think when you start to recognize how much you're just on autopilot, what do you want that autopilot to be? How do you want that to run?
Right.
So it takes a lot of work to begin this, but once you do it, it becomes habit. So now I just go out throughout the day and things come up for me all the time because I'm used to thinking this way. I'm used to asking myself questions. I'm used to reflecting. I'm used to, when I go into a lunch meeting, I'm not just on autopilot. I'm intentionally with that person. I am so present that actually, I've been told it can be quite intimidating or intense to be with me because I'm so there with the person that they can feel it. And that's what I'm glad. I want them to feel my presence with them. Like I would much rather be so present with someone than have them feel like my mind's all over the place and I'm not really there with them. Yeah.
Yes, because people can feel it, right? Even whether it's over the phone or particularly on Zoom, if someone is present with you, right?
Yes.
And I do think this takes a pause for a moment for us to say, if you are someone listening, watching, where you think, I do want to know myself better, I do want to understand what's making me tick, I am making
Hmm.
decisions that feel out of date, that feel like they
Hmm.
don't really fit who I want to be or who I have become anymore,
Hmm.
and you need or want guidance about that, right? You can send an email to inquire about working with a coach, right? To mo@iloveit.when.org,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or to Kathleen at
Mm-hmm.
cambium.com to be able to see, all right, what does that look like? To be able to explore what are the things that are important to you, because that decision for you to make for yourself is really a decision that you believe in yourself, and you know that you want to explore to the next level, but you're not sure what that is.
Mm-hmm.
Or you want to be open to ideas that are going to help you get there faster, with more greater vibrancy, with more health. Because I know, Margaret, you and I have talked to plenty of real estate professionals in any variety of the specialties who have migraines, who have digestive issues, who are
Yep.
tired,
Yep.
who think that the grind is something they don't know how much longer they can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it really does take just a few tweaks and some new habits and practices to
Mm-hmm.
be able to change the trajectory of that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you have on the handout for everyone, one of the books is Atomic Habits,
Mm-hmm.
right? Isn't it?
Oh, I don't know if I have that one on there, but I have read that one.
Oh, you have The Big Leap. So Atomic
Mm-hmm.
Habits by James Clear is one of the other books that I love to recommend, because he talks about if you're in a plane going from Los Angeles to New York,
Mm-hmm.
and all along the way, every hour, you just move the plane 1 degree, you will end up in Washington, D.C. So it's really quite slight to be able to
Yes.
change the trajectory. So same
Yes.
thing, if you're on a trajectory
Mm-hmm.
and you've been through the last 2 years in particular in the real estate industry, perhaps the last 4 years in the real estate industry, or perhaps the last 40 years in the real estate
Mm-hmm.
industry, right? And you're starting to feel like, wow, I don't really think I want to do it the same way I've been doing it. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't necessarily take a lot of changes in order to shift where you're going to end up.
Yes, that's a really good point.
Right. So it doesn't have to feel like this giant life project. You're not going to feel any different,
Mm-hmm.
for a long time. No, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily at all. Because one of the other things I got to see recently, after going to the Do More Deals Summit in Fort Lauderdale with elite builders, was that the industry is shifting, and the skills that agents need in order to really compete and be high caliber professionals is important. That this
Mm-hmm.
level of skill in the industry of being a professional, of knowing what are some choices for clients, what kind of
Mm-hmm.
financing choices are there? Do you have a
Mm-hmm.
wholesale network? Do you,
Mm-hmm.
what is your network of being able to help people who are in distress, or
Mm-hmm.
buyers who need some creative solutions to be able to get into property? So those skills, while they have always been important, are particularly important with the shifting of the lawsuits and the way in which prospecting and paid leads are going to be changing next year. So now, how do you want to be able to grow with that?
Mm-hmm.
And then these are some of the techniques for people to get to know who they are, what they value, what they need, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore what kind of decisions they want to make.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Was there anything from the handout or from things that you and I had talked about that we didn't get to talk about that we could do in our last few minutes?
Mm. Well, something that you just said made me think about how you were talking about the 1% change, and that it's not like it's this huge overhaul. I really like, because I like how you said that, because I think sometimes, even though I don't like the phrase self-discipline, there's something about it that just doesn't sound fun.
Right.
Uh, but self-discipline is really such a huge piece of it, because at some point I recognized that I was looking to all these different leaders. I remember going like between my boss to these different people that I had opportunities to meet. Like when I had the opportunity to meet Susan Scott, who wrote Fierce Conversations, I remember saying to her, like, how do you know what you want to do with your life? Like, can you tell me the secret sauce? Like what? And asked all these different people, and I kept looking for this external guidance. And I kept getting the same answer, which was, you will know it when you know it. Like, look to yourself. And I was like, what is this answer? I don't like this. And then finally, it was when I started meditating. Um, and it wasn't, 20, 30, 40 minutes of meditation. It was because of that book, The Miracle Morning, just 2 to 3 minutes of meditation for 40 days. And so he does this habit. So I've started this with my clients, where part of what you get when you work, I think, with Kathleen and with is you get some help and some support in building out small daily habits that over time you feel these bigger shifts from. And so when I started this meditation, I thought, oh, I'm not going to feel this. This is not going to make a difference. And it was around day 22 to 25 where, when I got up from my meditation, I felt like I'd been laying on the beach in Hawaii. And I was like, what is this feeling in my body? What is going on here? And I started to recognize what you just talked about, how these small incremental little changes were impacting how I felt physically, which was then impacting my day, how I interacted with other people, the decisions I made, so on and so forth. And so when you're starting to think about, what could I do to make some of these shifts, something as small as 2 to 3 minutes of meditation a day for the next 3 months would be my first recommendation if you're listening. And so something that I do with my clients when they work with me is I send them an auto text every day, anywhere from 4 in the morning to 8 in the morning, depending on where they live in the US. But it's a reminder to meditate. And then they respond back to me like when they've done it. And so just this little step that you can do for yourself, you can set up an auto reminder on your phone. If you do this for 40 days minimum, I pretty much will guarantee you that something will happen. I can't tell you exactly what it is, if you'll feel something in your body or if something will happen for you, but something will happen because you're connecting with that part of yourself that so often we're not encouraged to connect with. Because in this world, like we've talked about with the hustle culture, it's just go, 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 go. If you're not working on your business, you better be cleaning your house, or you better be doing errands or doing something. So if you do something like this, I think there's so many different little things that you can do that if you just stay consistent with it over a certain amount of time, you'll start to see results. So,
Agreed.
yeah,
And if you need anyone to give you permission to take 3 minutes a day
3 minutes.
to meditate and get to know yourself and listen and ask a question, then we give you permission
Mhm.
wholeheartedly, unilaterally, to that you deserve 3 minutes of quiet
Mhm.
reflection, to
Mhm.
be able to be grateful, explore, be peaceful, be at rest, not have to be doing anything.
Mhm.
What you're doing is pausing,
Mhm.
right? And listening and getting in tune, but it is
Mhm.
being, because we're a
Mhm.
human being, not a
Yeah,
human doing.
yeah.
The being leads to the doing, right? You
Mhm.
and I are also both big fans of Kyle Cease,
Mhm.
comedian turned author,
Mhm.
who also has online training programs. Very, very funny. He's just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So big shout out, Kyle. We're big fans. To be able to not take ourselves so seriously and
Mhm.
also explore the fact that as we know ourselves, we are really, really free to make different decisions, to make
Mhm.
decisions that, and I also want to take some of the seriousness out of decisions, right? So there's all these
Mhm.
perfectionists and the analysis paralysis, because we also write that perfectionist book in BU.
Mhm.
But the idea being that in fact, I reposted this on Instagram yesterday, I think it was. Our plan is to go from point A to point B, but the universe, God, your higher self, whatever you might want to call it, right? But actually looks like, hey, valleys and
Mhm.
curls around, and then we go around the mountain again to hopefully get where we thought we wanted to go. But it doesn't look
Mhm.
like that straight line. And those aren't really mistakes. So
Mhm.
they're just choices that we make the best decision we can with the information we have at the time. And if it isn't the right decision to really get you where you want to go, you're probably going to see the symptoms of that pretty quickly.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then you simply make another decision.
Exactly.
Those are
Mhm.
the lessons. And so it really does start to lighten the load
Yeah.
about the whole
Yeah.
idea of not doing it right.
I like the way you put that. I realize I've also recently started calling it data collection. So
Yeah,
when I tell people like, hey, I want you to go play with this activity and just collect some data. You're just collecting data. The more data you collect, the better decisions you can make. And that's been really helpful too, because when you can come at it from a playful point of view, it's just that much more fun too, because life is supposed to be fun.
it is.
Hmm.
Although there are certainly lots of times where that doesn't feel like that at all, right?
Yes.
All this context around the fact that it's supposed to be fun. It's at least if we can do our part to participate and look at it
Yeah.
from that way and shake the limiting belief that it isn't fun and that it's drudgery or right that it's
Hmm.
painful and terrible and blah blah blah. But it really
Hmm.
can be where knowing yourself allows you to evolve, to flourish. And
Hmm.
I also saw a quote recently that the butterfly is only beautiful because the caterpillar was brave,
Oh, I love that.
right? So, and butterflies cannot see their own wings. So we also have to see the beauty in one another to help
Hmm.
reflect back to them so they can see it in themselves. And that's
Hmm.
probably a perfect line to end on because I see the beauty in you, Miss Margaret Smith.
Oh, thank you. I see yours as well. I just got an image of both of us with butterfly wings.
Butterfly wings,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah,
thank you for being here. Thank you for creating the PDF that we'll send out to
yeah.
everyone. Thank you for exploring all of these different avenues about how to know yourself and be able to apply. And
Hmm.
I, as always, wish you well and thank you for being here with me and encourage
Thank you.
everyone to be able to check out iloveitwhen.org.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Pleasure.